Well, everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. Welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film and all aboard the Scorsese train. It's keep rolling. Now we're in the 90s. We're three films into the 90s, and now we're getting some historical dramas with The Age of Innocence. But this week I have my pal Rowan here from SiftPop. So Rowan, thank you for coming on.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And please shamelessly plug whatever you'd like to shamelessly plug.
Well, since I've been on here last, I have started another podcast.
Okay.
This one is specifically tied into the website that I have, The Lenient Critic, and it's called The Lenient Critic Podcast. Every week, every other week, we will talk about the films that came out in the last few weeks. We'll preview what's coming out in the next couple weeks, and we'll talk about a certain category. So it's pretty all encompassing when it comes to what's happening in the world of film right now.
Awesome.
So that could be found any podcast player. Just search The Lenient Critic Podcast, and also at thelenientcritic.com. So
there you go. Exciting. So check it out. And it's funny because the last Q&A that I did, Adam, who just was on my other show this week, was like, so when are you going to start a podcast? And can I co-host it with you? So, because I put them thought in it, I have a podcast and it's literally just on my YouTube channel and it's a group of my friends, so I've never actually put it on like a audio site like Spotify and Apple, like iTunes and stuff like that. But, put some thought into it. Instead, I started a different show, so which actually came out first episode today as we're recording this. So
wonderful.
I'm going to shamelessly plug Wasteland Talk, so go check out my video of me gushing about all the spoilers related to Spider-Man No Way Home, because I was a good boy and was very vague in my reviews for that movie, because a lot of things to surprise people with.
Absolutely.
And if you haven't seen it yet, I'm a little surprised, seeing as it's made over $600 million domestically already.
I also did a Spider-Man spoiler episode on my podcast with Alice and Foster from SiftPop. And the episode ended up being about as long as the movie, just about 2.5 hours. We had a lot to say, but
I think the longest show that I've ever done was 3.5 hours and I had to cut it in half.
Wow.
It was my first podcast with my friends Matt and Alex, who I do Development Hell podcast with, and we were doing our top 10 films of all time. So took a lot of time.
I can imagine.
I'll be recording with them tomorrow talking about Drive.
Excellent.
So check out for our thoughts on some 10-year anniversary of Drive, which I don't like that. I don't like the sound of that. And then makes me realize I watched it when I was 20. And I'm 30 now. But none of this is the point of this show. The point of this show is our 3 parts, where we have coming attractions, our feature of the week, and some recommendations. So for Friday, January 7th. So Rowan, what are you looking forward to coming attractions for this coming weekend?
So I have been told that I will be the first person on the show to talk about a TV series that is coming out this weekend. On Sunday on HBO, season 2 of The Righteous Gemstones will have a 2-episode premiere. And I just finished watching season 1 yesterday with my parents, and it's now probably one of my favorite shows of the last few years, and that's really saying something. There's been a lot of fantastic TV in the last couple years. But yeah, Danny McBride, John Goodman, Adam Devine play members of a televangelist family, owners of a mega church. And the crazy stuff that they get up to is just absolutely insane. And Shane and I were talking about this before recording. I think Danny McBride is best when he's allowed to go completely off the rails and do whatever he wants with these HBO series. Seeing as they're on premium, it's a premium cable channel, you could do literally everything, nudity, sex, violence, language, the sky is literally the limit here. So yeah, season 2 of The Righteous Gemstones starts on Sunday, and I will be eagerly watching.
And we can all rest assured that Jesse only did cocaine, maybe a little crack.
Exactly.
Oh, I've watched the first season now twice because I watched it when it was on, and then I watched the whole thing this weekend with my fiance, and we're very ready. And it's interesting because it's a big night on HBO Sunday night with that and Euphoria. So
Euphoria. Yeah, I'm also very, very excited about Euphoria.
it's
In
going to
the
be a
interest of
great
only
night.
talking about one show, though, I will talk about the Righteous Gemstones. But...
If honestly, if I had to pick two, I would pick Righteous Gemstones too. When I saw the ads for that for the first time with John Goodman and Danny McBride and Walton Goggins is Baby Billy, Uncle Baby Billy. Walton Goggins is just as good in all of these Danny McBride shows as he is.
Is he in Eastbound and Down? Because I know he's in Vice Principals, which I saw.
I don't know. At least the first 3 seasons that I've watched, I don't think he was. I would have remembered Walton Goggins because I've known Walton Goggins since Major Leagues, back to the minors as Downtown Anderson. So going way back.
Right.
Before he started popping up in, I feel like him popping up in Quentin Tarantino movies was kind of like, bam. He was in Django, he was in The Hateful Eight, and really got a chance to shine. Now for something completely different. My coming attraction this week, which is getting its theatrical release before getting released on Amazon Prime in a couple weeks, is A Hero from director Asghar Farhadi, who is a 2-time, previously known as foreign language film Oscar winner, now international film for The Salesman and for A Separation. And I'm not going to say anything because I'm embargoed. Because I saw the film already, but I was very excited for the film to begin with. And I'm very excited to see what people think about this very dramatic, intense, and honestly kind of thrilling Iranian film. It's definitely going to be one of the top contenders for international film this year. So if it pops up anywhere around you, or you could just wait a couple weeks and watch on Amazon Prime.
Right.
So, which honestly, I would suggest to most people at this point. But, we'll see. But those are our coming attractions. We were managed to get 2 nice things, even in January, because trash month. So now our feature of the week is The Age of Innocence, which is based off of Edith Wharton's novel from, I believe, like 20s.
Yeah.
And
20s.
From what I understand, Martin Scorsese's co-writer on this showed him this book in like 1980 and was like, Martin, I think you could do this. I think this will be a good fit for you. Fast forward 13 years later, when it finally gets released, this is a period drama, which basically the only like real period drama I know I've seen of Scorsese before this, because this is a first time watch for me, was Gangs of New York. And that's a very different kind of movie. But it does have Daniel Day-Lewis in it. So this has Daniel Day-Lewis. It has Winona Ryder. It has Michelle Pfeiffer. Both of Martin Scorsese's parents and himself popping up in small cameos, and also Richard E. Grant a little bit thrown in there, which I don't think he was that big of a character, but like I noticed him. But Rowan, so I always like to start off by asking my guests, because like sometimes people really want to be on the show for a particular film because they love it. But what interests you in giving this one a try?
So when I was sent a list of potential films that I could be on, I did some research on all of them. And honestly, it was really a toss-up. They all looked pretty interesting to me for very different reasons. I am not the biggest Scorsese guy, not because I don't like what he does, but because I just haven't seen enough of what he's done. But this one, The Age of Innocence, looked very different from anything that I'd seen from him before, and anything that he's made since. And so I chose that one sort of on a whim. I checked it out, and period dramas usually aren't my go-tos. I usually like period dramas when they are infused with some sort of fantasy or sci-fi, because that's the kind of person I am. Like, I loved The Nevers, the HBO series.
Okay.
Infused with a little bit of science fiction fantasy there.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that drew me to this one is the talent involved. Daniel
Mm-hmm.
Day-Lewis, Winona Ryder, who was she nominated, or did she win an Oscar for this performance?
I think she was nominated,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. I was looking at this year in film, and well, because I'm trying to remember what the big winners were, because this was 1993.
Mhm.
So, but it's been interesting because I've been taking a look at like some of these years with some of these Scorsese films, and I think one of them was like the Rain Man year. I'm like, something's gonna win here. But yes, Winona Ryder was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for this.
Yeah. And so that was, I really knew nothing going into this, and I watched it. And I thought it was perfectly fine. It didn't blow me away, but I was never bored. I liked being immersed in this world for 2 hours, and I liked the characters. So
yeah, and for me, also first time watching this film, it was something very different and similar to you. Before I did this whole jump into Scorsese on my show, I realizing now I did see a lot of Scorsese up to this point, but like I remember when I was younger and even like thinking about the college, I'm like, I think my favorite Scorsese was like The Departed. And I remember watching The Departed in my dorm room for the first time and literally screaming out in joy at the end of the movie when a certain someone shows up at the very end of the movie. And realizing now as like I've grown older and watched his films and watched them a couple of times, I'm starting to really fall in love with Martin Scorsese as a filmmaker, and starting to realize too that he speaks to me a lot as an Italian American from New Jersey. The way that he infuses Italian American life and Catholicism and Catholic guilt and all that fun stuff just really speaks to me. And this is so interesting because there's sometimes I have gone into some of these Scorsese films thinking, how's this a Scorsese film? And then when I'm sitting there watching this film and realized how much of a New York story this is, I'm like, aha, that's where this comes in. Because what does Scorsese love more than Italian Americans? New York City. And this film is like that high society New York people, and first world problems. A lot of first world problems in this movie. It's one of those kinds of things where it's like these are a lot of higher up people in higher social class system, and not only is it a period drama, it's a romance, and we got ourselves a love triangle. And what some of the interesting things, at least for me watching this and seeing some of those Scorsese-isms, a lot of voiceover. For me, it didn't work as well in this. It felt like one of those like really old school kind of thing where it's like, we're going to seem very high society here and we're going to talk you through all of these things. And it's just like, it felt like a lot of exposition dumping, but like different between, I felt like this and how this was different from like Goodfellas is, in Goodfellas, we're having Henry tell us all these things and his wife, and at times too. And it's like, we're getting into their head, their personality. A lot of this is like, could have been like Julie Andrews with posh voice, like talking us through all these different kinds of things. But I guess, Rowan, for you, what were some of the things that really stuck out to you that you really liked about the film?
Well, definitely the filmmaking, the cinematography aspect really stood out to me, especially from the first scene when everyone is at an opera, and we got a lot of very cinematic panarounds, and just some great like stylistic framing of the stage. I really enjoyed that, and honestly, I feel like the scenes that were set at the opera were the most dynamic of the film, I think. Not necessarily just because they're watching a stage show, but because we have to keep alternating between the stage show and between the people watching it, because there is actual story happening while these people are watching the play. So that was what stuck out to me from the very beginning. Another thing that stuck out to me that I didn't that I didn't love or hate, I'm just sort of neutral on, that I want to point out is there are a decent amount of characters here. Not only because we have the three main characters, the love triangle that you were referring to, but we also have Richard E. Grant. I don't remember many of these characters' names, but we have Richard E. Grant. We have Jonathan Pryce, apparently, who I don't remember being in that movie at all.
Yeah, he was a Frenchman.
Yeah. Yeah.
A couple of it's so interesting because I've seen him in a couple of movies where he pops up with a French accent, and it's just like, wait a minute. Because
right.
I definitely didn't know who he was when I watched Time Bandits for the first time. I know, so not Time Bandits, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen from Terry Gilliam. And then when I rewatched it, I'm like, is that Jonathan Pryce doing a really terrible French accent?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, with the balcony and the opera house, Bauhaus, the cinematographer who's worked on, as I've noticed, a lot of Scorsese films, it's really great use of like deep focus in a lot of those conversations. Because just the setup of like each of these balconies with multiple rows, and like you'll have right in the front like Richard E. Grant chatting with somebody, and you have Daniel Day-Lewis sitting there the whole entire time, and he's interacting and engaging in other things, and like you could see him back there and picking up on stuff. And something that I've noticed too, because one of the biggest things that I've learned from going through all of Scorsese's filmography is he has a lot of range. And I don't know if as many people realize how much range, because like this is a man who's done concert films, and you can feel that in this. He knows how to capture a performance on stage. And I think he brings that into this film with the opera performance, because like you can feel the energy of the performance. And like I love The Last Waltz. That was one of my favorite ones to take a deep dive into. But like he knows how to capture that. And like, yes, you need a guide, some kind of key with all these characters. And because like it's the kind of thing where it's just like, who's related to who?
Exactly. Yeah, most of these characters are family members of the of the main three. And I must say I was confused at some point, especially at the beginning when they leave us to sort of, despite the abundant narration, some stuff like a lot of the character relationships they leave up to us to figure out. Honestly, I think a lot of the narration, or all of the narration, I feel like we could have figured out that out from the context. I understand why it was included, just to just so they didn't have to include as many scenes of, now this is happening and then this is happening. But I do think the narration did get a little bit distracting after a while, especially because it feels like, Scorsese at this point was an experienced enough director to trust the audience, but the narration feels like he doesn't trust the audience enough to intuit everything that is going on.
I think it's one of and obviously this is conjecture, but like for me, I'm sitting there watching this film, especially some of his films around this time, like Cape Fear was an ode to Hitchcock. And there's a lot of Hitchcock in that movie. I feel like this film feels like he's not only making a period drama, but he's also making this how they used to make period dramas. And it was very common to have, all of this voiceover and narration in a lot of films. And this is an interesting connection, but it reminds me a lot of Hateful Eight, which one of the things that I hated most about that movie is when Quentin Tarantino decides like, and somebody poisoned the coffee, and do that stupid voiceover in the middle of the film. And I know why he did it, because it's supposed to feel like an old school murder mystery. And that's how they used to make them. And I think it's a different thing, because like I've watched some older films where I'm just like, they don't need all this narration. But I think it was a stylistic choice. And like, that's how they used to make films a lot of the times. And you can probably figure that out too, where it's like, maybe for budget reasons and trying to like not shoot every single little thing that needs to happen. It's like you throw in some voiceover and stuff like that. And from completing the aesthetic of the film, I think it fits what Scorsese is trying to do. But from like an actual watching the film, I'm just like, I don't need this person talking at me this whole entire time.
Right.
As I'm sitting through the film. I think one of the most things I was most excited about was watching this film to see Daniel Day-Lewis, to be perfectly honest, because huge fan of Daniel Day-Lewis, and obviously he had one of his most renowned roles in a Scorsese film with Bill the Butcher, and obviously this is a very different role. There's a lot of very prim, proper. This reminded me more of a Woodcock performance from like Phantom Thread, where it was much more subtle. But you know, Daniel Day-Lewis knows how to make the tiniest little choices as an actor that just say so much. And Scorsese was also being very subtle in a lot of things, because like you see there's a lot of sexual tension between Daniel Day-Lewis and Michelle Pfeiffer in this film. And for actually like the whole entire film, it's a lot of like, here's a close-in frame of Daniel Day-Lewis's very veiny hand coming in and like holding Michelle Pfeiffer's, and you're just like, and it's just
holding hands.
And like it feels that way too. It's just like, oh, how dare he? And like the point where it's like they finally like he like kisses her on the back of the neck, and she's just like, and just like I'm like,
it's such a big deal.
Yes, and it's just like this feels like an old school kind of period romance where it's just like back in like the 20s and 30s, you weren't seeing much more than like, oh my God, they're holding hands. But the thing is, Scorsese is such a fantastic director. Like he pulls all that tension and emotion out of it, and you feel, and you're just like, oh my God. And especially from a bunch of like high society, like prim and proper, stiff upper lip type people. And those little moments of like, oh my God, emotion really do hit. So sitting here thinking about this film, and this is such an interesting, when I was writing about this too, for an article that I wrote about it, one of the things that stuck out to me most is that big idea and theme of like, do you do what's expected of you and what the safe thing is, or you chase that dream? And that becomes a big part of this film, because I feel like that's kind of where you have Archer sitting in this film, where it's just like, okay, Winona Ryder plays a really sweet and kind and good person in many ways. And it's just like, why wouldn't you want to marry this very nice, well-to-do person? But you know, Michelle Pfeiffer's a lot more exciting. And Archer really feels a connection. There's like a coldness and like a properness with him and Winona Ryder's character, but there's some fire underneath whenever he's around Michelle Pfeiffer's character. Who did you want him to wind up with?
Well, see, I feel like the movie wants us is having us lean in the direction of Michelle Pfeiffer, because because that seems to what makes him the happiest.
Yeah.
At least, you know, for the majority of the film. But you know, I don't mean to because like these characters are not the actors that play them. Yeah. But I must say I do like Winona Ryder better than Michelle Pfeiffer, not for any particular reason. It's just how I feel. And I also and you know, it's going back to what you mentioned, you know, Winona Ryder is such like her character May is just so kind and so pure. But she's just not that interesting, and it's very it's very intentional in the portrayals of Michelle Pfeiffer and Winona Ryder, to to not manipulate the audience's feelings there, but just, you know, make it obvious which one we should be rooting for, only to only to, you know, sort of turn the tables on us at the end, you know, in sort of saying like, you know, the things don't always work out the way we want to, but you can still be happy in life even if it doesn't work out exactly the way you want it to.
Yeah, and casting goes a long way too.
Yeah,
because it's
absolutely.
like you have Winona Ryder here, and like at this point, Winona Ryder is like young, sweet actress. Michelle Pfeiffer, on the other hand, and like if I'm not mistaken, like probably Batman Returns was like a year or two before this, and it's like audiences just saw her as Catwoman.
Right.
This is like a whole other kind of energy here, and you know, you do that. If you can capture that actor, and the right actor can bring the right thing to the right role. And I feel like that's an important thing in this film, because it's like Winona Ryder is, and really earned this, because I think she has a more thankless role in this film. Because like Michelle Pfeiffer can be Michelle Pfeiffer and a lot of personality and charming, and like May is not dumb. Right. She knows something's going on here. And not gonna lie, when I was sitting there with her last interaction with Daniel Day-Lewis, I'm like, oh my, how that whole scene played out. I'm just like, not expecting that. And like, she knows a lot more than I think Archer gives her credit for. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe even the audience does up until that point. And then, like you said, like he still has a nice life. He has kids and stuff like that. And it's very interesting because like he has that opportunity at the very end to see Michelle Pfeiffer. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, does he?
Right.
And being confronted with that, because like that's a hard thing. And like I kind of took it when I was writing my article in a more of like, there's a relatability here, because I feel like many of us have probably been in a situation where it's like, do I do the thing that I'm supposed to? It's more dutiful, or do I go after the passion? And because like, for me personally, I talked a little bit about this. I got pretty personal. Like, I do love my full-time job that I have, but like, it would be really cool to do movie stuff for a living.
Right.
I am a very risk-adverse person, so I'm like not taking a whole lot of chances here. But it's like, I guess like in many ways, like I'm like Archer in this film, where it's just like you can tell like he doesn't make the big leap when he has that opportunity. And later in life, it's just like, does he have regrets? And I think that's something that we can play upon, which also, it's so funny seeing people in old makeup. Mm-hmm. And it's just like Daniel Day-Lewis is 64 years old now and looks so much better than he does in this movie.
It's like in the Harry Potter epilogue. You know, I just watched the reunion special and they were reminiscing about that, and they all look so much worlds better than they do in the epilogue of that film.
It's just endless glow up.
Right.
Posts about all of the cast of Harry Potter after watching the reunion. But like, I think the funniest thing with not to go off too much of a tangent, but like when Rupert Grint was talking about like, oh, I just went all in. I got the fat suit. I got the hair, everything. But yeah, like they do the older makeup to Daniel Day-Lewis, because you have that little epilogue in this film when it jumps into the future. But like, this is the kind of thing where it's like, everything is done so well technically in this film, because like it's Scorsese. Like, I'd be shocked if it wasn't, kind of thing. And you know, you have those like long takes and all those different kinds of things. And there's definitely moments where things pop. And I think those moments are really the moments that those emotions boil up above the surface between Daniel Day-Lewis and Michelle Pfeiffer. There's not a whole lot of them, but they're really well captured. And I think it did a nice job of building that tension throughout the film. Mm-hmm. It just, I feel like in the end, this definitely isn't Scorsese's like boldest film. I don't think it's his most, it doesn't have that like oomph That's a
Absolutely.
lot of his films have, because like he's that great of a filmmaker. And I just thought, I'm like, this is a really fine romantic drama. And like the costume, the production design, everything was like chef's kiss, because they went all out on this and really captured this whole entire world that we live in, this high society. And like, even going back to that opera scene, like everything about that opera house, all the costumes, the dress, everything just popped.
Yeah, yeah, like as you mentioned, technically it is a very well-made film, because that's Scorsese. He doesn't do half the assignment, he does the whole assignment.
Yeah.
And I mean, I may not love this movie, but I can appreciate the technical artistry done on it. As you mentioned, from everything, the production design, the sets, the costumes, everything was done the best that it could be. And the actors and the the creative team behind it, they clearly know what they are making, and they delivered in what they were supposed to and what they were trying to do. But so
yeah, I think and because like you expect Daniel Day-Lewis to go out there every single role and like kill it, like that deserved an Oscar. I just don't know if this character was interesting enough and had enough to him to really like. I felt this a similar way about like Last of the Mohicans. I love that film, and I love Daniel Day-Lewis. Him dual wielding giant rifles, like running across like a cliff. That's really cool. But the thing is, it's like they just weren't like as media roles, and like it's so crazy because I looked at it, I think he had like 9 acting roles after this. Wow. That's it.
Wow.
He became so particular about what he did. And of course, 3 of them got nominated for Best Actor, and he 4 of them got nominated for Best Actor. Wow. And he won 2 of them.
Right.
Obviously, some of them were showier than others. Like in a couple of weeks when I do Gangs in New York, showy as hell. And what I appreciate is like have you seen Phantom Thread?
I have not. That is the only movie from that year. The only Best Picture nominee that I did not watch. That was when I started to try to watch everything. Awesome. But that came out, 2017? So I think so, yeah. Yeah, I was 14. That movie did not appeal to my 14-year-old self. However, I would like to watch it at some point. So
it's interesting because I'm like, I remember when the trailers came out and I'm like, this is what Paul Thomas Anderson's doing. And this is going to be Daniel Day-Lewis's last film. And then I watched it. I'm like, oh my God. The trailer does not lead on to what this film really is. And what this film really is like, okay, this is a Paul Thomas Anderson film. And this is something Daniel Day-Lewis was worthy of doing. And I have never seen better acting of anybody reacting to somebody buttering toast. Because that performance is all of the choices are so small, but Daniel Day-Lewis makes them pop so big on screen.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of thing where it's like, I saw bits of that in this film, and I'm like, okay. Because like, that's the thing. Daniel Day-Lewis isn't one of the greatest actors of all time because he could be the biggest. He could do it all. And definitely in this film, it was the smaller choices. And I feel like a lot of this film was the smaller choices, except for maybe like the grandma, who was like, big character.
Right.
It was a lot of fun.
Right. Like a big character deserves a big performance, and it doesn't work without that. But, what I was thinking while I was watching was that all of these characters are so one note. A lot of them are pretty cliched. And then I realized, this is based on a book from the 20s, like, of course they're cliched. This is what was written about at that point. This was what romance was. And, to an extent, it still is. It's just in a different form.
Yeah.
And so, like that's why some of these characters feel like like cutouts with just one defining character trait, because that's what they are, and because that's what they have been. I believe there was a film adaptation of this from the 30s too, and so yeah, I mean, this is what was written about back then, so it only makes sense that these would be the characters that are portrayed.
Yeah, because like this is one of those kinds of films where it's like, how many adaptations is there probably of this? There's actually, so like there's one from 1924, 1934, and then just jump 60 years and then do it in 1993.
Right.
So it's that kind of film, and like I'm trying to see if there's any like people that I recognize from some of these older ones, but like that's the thing. And that was interesting watching the new West Side Story, because like I got lost in it. I loved it, and I'm watching it with my fiance and her best friend, and they're just like, this, like, what, they've known each other for an hour and it's just like, it's Romeo and Juliet,
right? Exactly.
That's what it was,
right? I
and
mean, if you're going to criticize West Side Story, criticize Shakespeare,
well, that's the thing, because like that was romance, and that's exactly what this film is. And I never thought that I'd see a pretty traditional romance, because to be perfectly frank, if you watch most Scorsese films, these are dysfunctional marriages that wind up happening in like all of these films.
If there even is a marriage, it's a terrible one.
Yes. So it's like, even if the male lead in his movie is functional enough to actually be in a relationship, because that's questionable in many of his films, I don't think anybody wanted to see an actual relationship where Travis Bickle was with somebody. But the thing is, it's like they're always so dysfunctional and crazy. And I think before this, the closest thing that we got to an endearing romance is Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And that film also has some really bad relationships in it. But like, even the relationship between Bernstein and Chris Christopherson has some tension there that they have to get over. This is more, there's nothing wrong with May. She's just really nice.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with May, but there's nothing crazy interesting about May. And it's just like, oh, this woman over here, Michelle Pfeiffer, a lot more interesting.
She knows how to party.
Party 1920s high society kind.
Exactly.
And it's that kind of thing where it's just like, oh, this isn't as complicated. It's just like, somebody's more interesting than somebody else.
Exactly.
And he does it. And then next week I'm going to be talking about Casino. Speaking of very toxic marriages. So but Rowan, do you have any other thoughts or anything that you wanted to bring up about the Age of Innocence?
Yeah, so when I finished this, my mom asked me how the movie was, and I said that was like the archetypal period piece. It takes everything that you might think of when you think of a period piece, and a romance, and it rolls it all into one movie, which isn't necessarily bad. I think that it, as we mentioned, it's done quite well and effectively. But I had not heard of this movie before I saw it on the list of potential ones, and I would say that it's not that unique, but it honestly is, because it is taking a story from about 100 years ago, from like in relation to us, and it's bringing it to life exactly how, or I haven't read the book, but it's bringing it to life in the way that I assume it was written, which is the audience of today and of the 90s is going to look on it very differently as the audience of the 20s would have. And the audience of the 30s would have seen the movie, because Daniel Day-Lewis kissing Michelle Pfeiffer on the neck would have been would be scandalous, but now it's oh yes, finally something is happening. But yeah.
It's like, oh my God, kiss her already. But like,
exactly,
that's the thing. It's like they take that slow building up that tension, and that's very true, because it's like it is a very unique experience for us watching it. And early 90s grunge was a thing, really a very different kind of place besides like the Roaring Twenties, which we only think that they were all innocent. What they were really doing.
Right. If you need any further proof, just look at The Great Gatsby, one of my favorite books.
Oh, there you go. Jay-Z knows.
Exactly.
Baz Luhrmann.
For some reason.
For some reason, because Baz Luhrmann. We'll see what he does with Elvis.
The only explanation we need.
Yep, exactly. Age of Innocence, Baz Luhrmann edition.
I mean, honestly, it would be interesting, to say the least.
It would. I did have to take a whole star off of this movie because, like, where was the Rolling Stones? Just kidding. It's very interesting because it is a very beautiful and effective score. And, like, obviously the other music in it's like opera music and stuff like that. And it's like so very different for a Scorsese film because it's like, where's all the like the big hits?
Right.
But it is back-to-back films with Elmer Bernstein doing the score for his films, and he delivers on both of them. Exactly. And they're very different ones because Cape Fear is very Hitchcocky. This one, not so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Age of Innocence is a really fine film. It's definitely towards the bottom for me for Scorsese films that I've been watching, and I've been watching a lot of them. I do have my Age of Innocence Criterion now, because that's how I watched it. Because piggy out.
If you can get it, why not?
Exactly. And as I'm sitting here, I'm like still waiting to watch my Kundun Blu-ray that I've got. A couple more weeks. But so that's Age of Innocence. And the last segment on this show is where we give some recommendations. So Rowan, what would you like to recommend to all the lovely folks listening and watching the show?
So I am going to recommend the original Friday the 13th from year 1980. For my birthday this year, I was gifted the Friday the 13th box set, including all of the films released from 1980 to 2009. I had seen only 2 of them before I started this mini marathon that will be taking part over several days because I am kind of busy. So I just recently watched the first Friday the 13th for the very first time. And, for a movie that started the, that really, heightened the slasher craze and, brought about a lot of tropes and cliches that we are still seeing in the world of horror and film today, it's quite slow. And a lot of the, most of the film is dumb teenagers doing dumb teenager things interspersed with, with some murder scenes. A lot of the lines and interactions seem almost improvised, and I think that's really what helps it work. We have Kevin Bacon here, before he was Kevin Bacon, just being a dumb teenager, and this is one of the only movies you can see him do that in. But this is an absolutely iconic film. I've been getting, I think I mentioned on my Lost in the Wasteland episode, I have been getting more and more into horror these last few years, and it's about time that I start watching the classics, and I think Friday the 13th is a very great place to keep going there. Halloween was a few years before it, but most would call Friday the 13th like the prototypical slasher, because after it came out, every studio was trying to copy it. Every studio was trying to churn out my favorite of the copycats is Sleepaway Camp. I don't know if you've seen that, Shane.
I have not, but I've heard a lot about it.
It's 1,000% more quotable than Friday the 13th, and it's 1,000% more ridiculous. So if you get, it's free on YouTube. If you get the chance to watch Sleepaway Camp, definitely go for it. But Friday the 13th is what I'm mainly recommending here. A horror touchstone and just a touchstone of classic films in general.
So I'm going to add on, this wasn't one of my recommendations, but I'm going to add this on as a compliment to Rowan's is the movies that made us, because the most recent season on Netflix had Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th. And that's the thing. Halloween didn't have gore. It didn't, it was a lot more reserved in terms of the filmmaking and the tension building up in it. And then you have Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street were all about the kills.
Yeah.
All about them. like arrow just
right. Yeah.
right through the throat.
Yeah.
But those kind of things. Now, when I do get a chance, and I've watched a lot the past week on my time off between the holidays, is I always like to throw out a new film that I saw, a rewatch of one of my films, and something that I checked off my watch list. So first off, for the new film is Last and First Man. And this is based off of a science fiction novel. And this is actually from director Johan Johansson. Mm-hmm. And this is his last work before he died.
Oh, wow.
And because he was a famous composer for like Denis Villeneuve. Mm-hmm. And this film is basically a bunch of black and white, very symmetrical shots of strange ruins and things like that, while narrated by Tilda Swinton, basically reading lines from the book of future humans 2 billion years into the future trying to tell us what they screwed up and how to like save things. And it's like an hour and 15 minutes. It's very art house. Like this is not like your standard science fiction kind of thing, but it reminded me like La Jetée, which became 12 Monkeys and stuff like that, where it's more of like shots with some voiceover over it, but like it's such a beautiful and interesting and intriguing watch. And Johansson's score too is very atmospheric and eerie and different. I wound up watching it I became a member of Metrograph, which is a theater. So you could see films there in the theater, but you could also stream films online. It's like $5 a month to be a member. And I was able to watch it on there. And it was definitely, like, for a cinephile like me, I was really interested by it. A film that I rewatched from my lovely collection here was Wildlife. And this is from director Paul Dano and writers Paul Dano and Zoe Kazan, about a young boy who's growing up out in like Wyoming, Montana area. And his father's like a jack of all trades. He's kind of like a con man. He could never keep a job. And it's Jake Gyllenhaal. And his father goes away, and his mother, Carrie Mulligan, starts living her life a little bit more. And kind of this whole story forces this young man to grow up. And it has tense moments. It's extremely well acted. It's a very interesting coming of age story. And I remember seeing it in theaters and absolutely loving it. Now have it on my lovely Criterion over here. And then this film had been on my watch list for a long time. Come and See, the film highest rated on Letterboxd. And my God, what a watch. It is an unbelievably gorgeous shot film, but oh my God, this is like Schindler's List kind of, I don't know if I could ever watch this again kind of thing, right, where it's brutal and shows all the horrible things the Nazis did in Russia as they were going through Russia. And it's definitely showing the horrors of war and humanity. And I'm not surprised I don't know if it still is, but like for a long time, it was the highest rated film on Letterboxd. So Come and See. Also, I watched it on the Criterion channel because it's playing there. So, but yeah, so those are my recommendations. Mm-hmm. And Rowan, thank you for having your recommendation of Friday the 13th.
Of course, of course.
Now, that's a wrap for this week on Welcome to the Wasteland. Rowan, I'm going to give you one last chance to shamelessly plug some things for our guests to go check out after they're done watching the show.
Yeah, so by all means, check out the Lenient Critic podcast and the Lenient Critic website. I also have a YouTube channel, The Screen Avenger. I just released, as of recording this, I just released a trailer with all of my content coming in 2022. It is my busiest year yet for releases, just because I am putting out a ton of stuff before I sort of tie up this universe I've been working on for a couple years and move on to new stuff. But oh God, am I excited to share what I've been working on. So, yeah, I'm doing a holiday special next December. I'm doing Oh man, hard to even put into words. I'm doing a movie that turned into a mini series because of how long it turned out to be, and yeah. So just subscribe. It helps, and I would very much appreciate it. That's the Screen Avenger on YouTube.
We have Ingmar Bergman over here. Just keep making the movies longer, and then you could release them separately as a mini series.
Exactly.
So there you go. But Rowan, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully all of you tune in next week when I jump in to talk about Casino with Frank. So that's going to be a fun time because Frank Short made my Eyes Wide Shut episode pretty priceless. So
I should go and listen to that. That sounds very entertaining.
That was a fun one because it was Aaron, our editor from SiftPop, was Frank, and my friend Vinny. And Frank sitting there drinking and occasionally throwing comments. It was perfect color commentary. But thank you all for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.